Hi, everybody. I am joined by Joanna today. We are going to be doing the Finally Fall book tag, or as some people have been saying in the comments already, the autumn book tag, which is fine. Did you grow up referring to it as fall or autumn or both?
Fall.
Yeah,
Or both. I always thought they were synonymous. Are they different?
that's kind of what I thought too, but now I'm wondering if it's different based on things I'm seeing in the chat. But I think they're pretty much the same. But you and I did this last year, but we did it a little bit differently in that we pre-recorded this and then put it out. So you then started this trend with the mid-year freak out book tag, I want to say, where you started doing it a lot as a live, and then everyone started doing it as a live, which I thought was really fun. So we decided this year we were going to do the Finally Fall book tag in the new spirit of doing things as a live.
Yes, I love it because then people can join us in the comment section and
Yes.
tell us their answers to this question.
Exactly. So I did create banners for the questions, just so I would be able to see them. But just so people watching know, I can't see the comments while the banner is like presently up. So I will be trying to go back and forth so everyone knows where we are. But do you have a preference of would you like to start with question one? Would you like to answer first for question one?
Sure. Yeah, I can
So
go ahead and do that.
our first question is in fall, the air is crisp and clear. Name a book with a vivid setting. First, I'm going to ask you a question though. Did you limit this to books that you read this year?
No, not
Okay.
necessarily. I was gonna
Okay.
try, and then I kind of came up with my answers at the last minute.
That's okay. I just piled my books here, so you're
Okay, good.
fine.
Yeah. So this answer is not immediate. I mean, I could think of tons of books that have a very clear, vivid setting. Maybe I will actually. I'm instead of the one I was going to choose,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go with Janny Wirtz's Wars of Light and Shadow.
Mm.
I read two of the books this year,
Yeah.
and the one uh let me think of what it's called. I have to look at it. Uh Grand Conspiracy.
Mm.
That particular one, there is a really cool forest setting
Mhm.
that is etched in my memory. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with, Wars of Light and Shadow. A lot of her settings are beautiful, and so I would definitely say, Jenny Wirtz's Wars of Light and Shadow, not Warhost of Vastmark. Ah,
Yeah.
Grand Conspiracy. No, what did I say? Yeah, Grand Conspiracy.
Grand Conspiracy. Okay. So I have yet to read Jenny Worth, but I was talking about her with Philip off screen last night, and I'm excited to ride Hell's Chasm. I think I'm probably going to try to do it in January with maybe jump on John from Talking Stories venture into Jenny Worth because two great things in one, John and Jenny Words. But my choice, I think I did limit it to books I read this year. One of my answers is kind of a stretch, but the only one that I didn't was the one that you want to return to because that in theory is like you haven't read it in a while. But I picked Pure and Easy because I just reread this for the book club that Josh and I are doing. And the setting is always just so vivid, so clear. I picture exactly what I'm supposed to in this world, I feel like, and this book just makes me feel all of the things. It's just I'm thumbing it up apparently, but honestly, like the best book. I love
Open up mine.
this book so much, and rereading it affirmed how much I loved this world and this setting.
I feel the same way about Piranesi, and I'm so
Mhm.
glad you chose that. It was funny because in your discussion with Philip last night, you were talking about how it gave you dreams, and it did the
Mhm.
same thing for me. As soon as I
Yes.
started reading the book, I started having these really interesting dreams, and I know that Brian from BellTube said that
Yeah.
he got
Said the
dreams
same
from it
thing.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something about that particular book that just
Yeah.
touches on the subconscious in a pretty profound way.
I know, and I'm not gonna say exactly what atmosphere it is because I feel like if people haven't read it, it's worth reading to experience that firsthand. But I had felt like um I have visited a place that I felt was very reminiscent of this. So I feel like my subconscious just kept pulling me back into that place. And I just had this very clear idea of how everything was. And it's just such everything about this book. Like I'm holding on to it because I love it so much. It's just perfect book.
It is, I love that book so much, yes.
Mhm. It is an excellent book. So, our second question is nature is beautiful, but also dying. Name a book that is beautifully written, but also deals with a heavy topic like loss or grief. This is a big one.
It is,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Last year, I went back and I watched um, our video from last year to see what some of my answers were because I've reread a few of the books that I read last year and I wanted to make sure I didn't use the same answers more than once. And I'm going to get flack for this and I don't even care. I chose A Court of Silver Flame by Sarah J. Maas because this book, a third of, or if not more, of this book is dealing with a group of women that have been violated in some way. There is heavy topics of essay, of parental loss and grief, grieving oneself, and the journey to exploration to find what life can look like beyond that pain. And this for me was such a heartfelt read. I talked about it in the mid-year freakout book tag in that it is one of the only books that has ever really made me cry. I have reread this book. I cried again when I reread it when I got to this one particular chapter. It just hit me in all of the feels. And it really highlighted for me that even though I know Sarah J. Maas is not someone for everyone, like Joanna is not a fan of Sarah J. Maas. And I wouldn't recommend her to everybody. But I do think that the thing she probably does best is she knows how to write grief very well. So that was my choice for question two.
Beautiful answer. Yes. I'm just gonna respond, if that's okay, to some of what
Absolutely.
people have said in the chat. So
Yeah.
as far as the just going back really quickly to answer 1, I just saw some wonderful answers such as The Winter of the Witch, which is the
Mm,
Winter Night trilogy, I believe, and that is a gorgeous setting type of fantasy series.
mhm.
And then, it says here that Simon Dinosaur agrees with you that Piranesi has great vibes.
Yes.
And, Evie's comment here about The King of Elfland's Daughter, I have not read that yet, but I want to
She
get
just
to it.
read it, yeah, and loved it. So I'm not surprised that she's encouraging people to read that. It did sound beautiful based on what she was
Yes,
doing.
it does sound beautiful, and, so last year for number 2, for grief, last year I did a answer with Pet Sematary, which is
Yep.
what that thing called Mitch answers here, and
Yeah.
Toll the Hounds, hot take, it wasn't my favorite Malazan book,
Mhm.
but I do think it deals with grief for sure. You deal with all the stages of grief in that particular
Sure.
book, but Pet Sematary is such like, I don't think it gets better than that when it comes to grief,
Yeah.
but I am gonna choose a different book this year, and that's gonna be one I recently read. I just recently finished The Serentine Mosaic by Guy Gavriel
Yes.
Kay, and
Mhm.
I think that this especially book 1, uh, Sailing to Sarantium, you could see some of it in Lord of Emperors 2 and book 2, but I
Mhm.
think that that theme there are, like, several themes in the duology, but I do think that grief is handled beautifully, especially because the main character that we follow has lost loved ones at the beginning of the story,
Mm.
and there is a really powerful, poignant moment in this story that sheds a light on loss or that highlights that theme. And
Yeah.
it was powerful for me because I read that scene I was reading that scene right when, sadly, my cat passed away this last
Yeah.
month, and my husband had come in and to tell me that our cat was gone, right when I was reading that scene in the book.
Oh,
So it
wow, how
hit all the
poignant.
harder. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that this one would be my choice for grief and loss.
Yeah, that's I mean, do you feel like that scene kind of aided you in any way? Yeah, like it helped you with grief?
It was very strange the way that worked out because I think I needed to process my feelings. I handled it a little bit differently than my husband did, and I've always wondered about that. You know, different people process grief differently, and
Very much
I've
so, yeah.
processed grief differently depending on the situation.
Mhm.
But with my cat, I sobbed, like, that
Yeah,
morning, and I sobbed all day really hard. I mourned
yeah.
the loss immediately, and I felt like I needed to just wallow in that for a
Oh,
while
yeah.
there. Whereas my husband, he processed it a little more slowly over the next few
Mhm.
days, But yes, I felt like it was exactly what I needed that day. Now, the tone of the story, I felt like shifted away from that in the middle
Sure.
section, and it kind of returns to that melancholic feeling towards
Mhm.
the end, which I kind of, in some ways, felt a little conflicted about because I felt like I still needed to be in that melancholy place
Yeah, I hear you.
when the story shifted. But yes, I was it was very serendipitous, it was very strange, but it I think the timing worked out.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear you. I am very much with pets especially, I I wallow in that. And like my first cat, my boy, he's on my necklace here. If everyone ever like catches one of the letters on my necklace, I have him with me all the time. But when he passed away, it was very sudden. You and I kind of discussed that a little bit, but I that night just I cried myself to sleep, and then I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like subconsciously looking for him and realized he wasn't there and started wailing again. And Josh just held me as I bellowed for like 3 straight hours. I just couldn't stop. And sometimes you just have to live in that feeling. And I hear you. When like happiness sort of like starts creeping in through other things, you're like, I'm not ready to be happy just yet. Like I need to sit in my feelings for a little while. And yeah, I'm happy that you had that experience with that book. It's gonna make it such a memory for you for that experience, I would think, going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Thank you, for
Yeah,
sharing all that, and thank you everybody in the chat as well.
yeah, Bakira. Hugs, Joanna.
Thank you very
Rogue says, I was grieving when I read the Sarantine mosaic as well. It's interesting.
Mhm.
um, yeah, I agree. There's some places that have now started giving bereavement for animal loss, which
Oh,
is
that's wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big, big thing. Big, big thing. Yes. Yay, Josh. Yes, he did. He just got new kittens. They're very sweet. He shared them in my Discord.
Aw.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think question 3 is a bit happier. In that fall is back to school season. Share a nonfiction book that taught you something new. I misread this question and I went for a fiction book. Let me think on it for a second. Do you have an answer for this?
I do, and I didn't think through the question enough when I chose it, but there's
Yes.
only one nonfiction book that I can think of that I read this year, and that
Yeah.
is, Determined by Robert Sapolsky. I'm a
Okay.
huge fan of his first book, Behave.
Hmm.
Amazing book. It's all about human beings at our best and worst,
Okay.
and about the science behind that, like why
Oh,
we are the
nice.
way we are. And if you read that book, it feels like he's making a pretty strong case, and he's a neuroscientist, he's also a
Mhm.
primatologist, but it sounds like he's making a pretty strong case for this idea that we don't have free will. And
Mm,
then in the book, Determined, he really hammers that case, like, we have no free will.
interesting.
And I think I know it's kind of a controversial topic,
Yeah.
and I feel somewhat agnostic about it. Like, I feel like, yeah, I think it's possible we don't have free will, and even if we do, I think we probably have a lot less than we imagine we have.
Mhm.
But, at the same time, I did appreciate how deep he went into the topic. He brought in a lot of science and a lot of history, and
Hmm,
he also, raised a case for compassion, I think,
hmm.
when you realize that people maybe aren't always in control of their circumstances and their
Sure.
mental health for that matter, and
Yeah.
how much we've grown over time understanding certain mental health conditions.
Mhm.
But also, I think the other thing that stuck with me about that book, about Behave, is uh, just yeah, like I think it was the history of that, and also, I'm trying to think of what the other thing was. Yeah, that was the main thing. I'm trying to think, there was something else that he said in that book that also was really impactful. I can't remember now. Sorry, go ahead.
Mhm. Oh, you're fine.
What was your fiction book, though?
I actually do have a nonfiction choice, so I'm saved. But
Good. Yeah.
my fiction choice. was Fourth Wing because it taught me that I liked romantasy. That was my intro to romantasy book, which is not like this meaningful answer that you just gave. But the nonfiction book that I read was How to Be Perfect: The Correct Answer to Every Moral Question by Michael Schur, who was the creator of The Good Place and a former writer for The Office and Parks and Rec. And if people are familiar with The Good Place, the entirety of the show's concept is basically dealing with ethics and philosophy. And it was really interesting to get into the nitty gritty of the actual philosophies that they used in the show and how that came to be, and Mike Schur's own personal journey with ethics and philosophy and the determination of what makes someone good. And it was, I have taken ethics classes before. I've taken some intro to philosophy classes, nothing like too in depth, but I found it really, really interesting because also I loved the show so much.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating for me because when I was a teacher, I had students that watched the show and they would come in and tell me how they were learning about ethics and they were learning about all of these conundrums. And they were like, well, Chidi would say, and then they would like go into a philosophical theory. And I was like, this is incredible that students are using this medium to actually learn about philosophical thought and idea. And for me, it was really interesting watching the evolution of how philosophers have tried to quantify and qualify what is good and what is bad, and basically the historical periods in which they lived and how that kind of dictated what they were and were not saying. If some of them lived in more heavily religious areas, or if some of them lived in these enlightened periods of time where the like salon periods and stuff. But his section on Immanuel Kant in the book was probably my favorite. I really love Kant and his style of ethics. It's really, really fascinating. So I would say that because it's one of those books that makes you sit back and go, am I a good person? And the thing that he talks about in the book is how we can be so consumed with the concern that we are a good person that we inadvertently do bad things. And I really loved that.
That's a fascinating takeaway.
Yeah, it was
So
really, really great.
so am I oversimplifying Kant? Because what I remember about Kant is the categorical imperative and
Mhm.
how if you believe something is right for one person, it has to be right for all people. Was that the idea behind
It's
Kant's?
part of it, yeah. A big part of it for him too is the ends not justifying the means, and applying that into different situations, right? And it's just Kant is very complex, which is one of the things that I like about him because when you read him on surface level, you go, okay, that doesn't sound too difficult, but when then you actually try to put it into practice and theory, you go, oh no, wait, this is actually very detailed. And that's part of what the whole takeaway is from that, in which if we become so consumed with the ethics behind every decision we make that we become more insular and we're not as present with the people around us that we should be. And we are therefore inadvertently doing bad things because we're being neglectful or we're not present enough with our spouse, our family, our friends, our children. So it was really, really good.
I think that makes perfect sense because I could
Yeah.
see somebody being so up in their head about this is the right ethical code that we're suddenly
Hmm.
lacking empathy, that we're
Yeah.
lacking, like you said, that presence or
Yes.
that compassion piece,
Hmm.
which also you could argue is important for being a good person as well. That there
Absolutely.
are so
Yeah.
many different areas to balance when it comes to that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, Derry, the book is called How to Be Perfect: The Correct Answer to Every Moral Question. Yeah, here we go. How to Be
That's a
Perfect.
really
Yeah.
fun title too. Oh, I remember what I was gonna say
Yeah.
about behave that I thought was interesting. One
Mhm.
thing that he says, and there are several things he says, and I failed to remember all the details about the book. I probably could have
Yeah.
taken notes when I was reading it, but one of the things that he says in that book is that he seemed to come to this conclusion that people are more they're more tied down to this idea of stubbornly hanging on to their successes, like, "I
Mhm.
did this,"
Yes.
rather than understand that's the hardest part about accepting you have no free will, is that
Mhm.
you didn't do that. as far
Right,
as
it was
success is
predestined for
concerned.
you to do that?
And people get really hung up about that. They get really angry. They're like, "Yes,
Sure.
I worked for that. I did that. I did a lot of hard work. I did a lot of this and that,
Yeah.
and I earned my success." And it's like, "Well,
1
not
second.
really."
Keep answering. My kitten over here is knocking everything off the table. You keep answering, though. I am listening.
Sure. Yeah, so it just got me thinking about things like, when people feel successful in life, whether they're successful in education, they're not taking into account, for example, I mean, there are so many factors that can go into that, right? Like whether you were in the right place at the right time, whether you had
Absolutely.
certain educators, whether you had a
Yes.
certain socioeconomic background
Mhm.
or a certain color of skin that kind of gave you some privilege here and there, all types of different aspects that we
Just
don't take
some,
into
yes.
consideration and
Yeah,
that
I
factor into
when you were
success.
talking about that, it made me really wonder in the sense of less a spiritual guiding force of, "Oh, you don't have free will," more as almost like parental expectations, societal expectations, like those types of things, and in essence, dictating what your choices will be, what your path will be, as opposed to it being like a supernatural, unseen force almost.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, yeah. He totally digs into that. He digs into it on so many different levels.
Mhm.
I was really, really impressed. I know some people still highly disagree with his takeaways
Sure.
or with the concept or with the premise, but and I think that's fair. I think that that's we just don't know everything about neuroscience. Like there's
No.
just so much about our brains and the way that we function as human beings that we
Mhm.
still don't have all the answers for. Maybe we never will, but I still think
Yeah.
it's worthwhile to explore those questions. I love those
Absolutely.
questions, so I
Yeah.
had a good time,
I think
hearing his thoughts.
it's worthy of that too, in the sense that if you wanna have a proper opinion on the work, to actually read it, right? And then you can add your own personal discourse to it as opposed to just being like, "Well, I don't agree with that theory," but not having actually read the book.
100%,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah.
agreed. Alright, question 4. In order to keep warm, it's good to spend some time with the people we love. Name a fictional family, household, friend group that you would like to be a part of.
Okay. Do you want me to go first, or do you wanna go first?
Whatever you prefer, I don't care.
Alright, I'm gonna go with this answer. It's kind of a weird answer. And it's because I have a hard time when it comes to finding books that have a lot of found family elements. I
Mhm.
noticed that I don't usually pick up a lot of books with this, even though I know it's a
Okay.
popular trope in fantasy.
It is, yeah.
Last year I said The Lions of Alverson, I think,
You did? Yep.
from Guy Gabriel Kay, and I think he
Yep.
does a really good found family
Yeah.
trope in his stories. But I think I'm gonna go with The Last Unicorn. Now, this
Nice.
was a reread for me this year. Have you ever seen the movie or read the book?
I have not, no, but
Oh.
I'm intrigued by the cover.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah,
this is a very old, Peter S. Beagle. He's still
yeah.
writing. I think he just
I've
came out with
seen
a
the
book this
book, I
year.
just have not read it. Yeah.
Yes, so this is about the last unicorn, a unicorn who's in the forest, and she finds out from this butterfly. It's kind of whimsical. It's very whimsical, actually.
Hmm.
This butterfly who tells her, who speaks in riddles and tells her, "You're the last of your kind." And so she feels very sad, realizing, "I'm
Yeah.
the last. I can't be the last." And she starts to find out what happened to all the other unicorns, and she wants to
Mm.
find her kind. She doesn't wanna be a unicorn, in the sense we always think
Yeah.
a unicorn is one of a kind, and she doesn't wanna be alone, and so it's actually very
Mhm.
stressful and sad for her, and so she
Yeah.
makes some friends along the way as she tries to find the last of her kind. So she
Mhm.
meets this quirky, somewhat incompetent magician wizard named Schmendrick, and
Yeah.
this woman who's no longer a young maiden named Molly, and Molly is heartbroken because it was always her dream to see a unicorn when she was young, and now
Mhm.
she's no longer young, so she's seeing the unicorn now in older age, but they come together and they make their way to this this, castle where this person has kept all the unicorns, and so it's a journey, and it's beautifully written.
Yeah.
It's so whimsical, it has good humor, has some good meta humor in
Mhm.
the story as well, but I did love this little
Oh,
group
that's
of
awesome.
friends that meet along the way,
I
so that'll
love
be my
that.
answer.
This comment has made me laugh. House of Usher. Uh, that's a bold choice. Hello, Dr. Philip Chase, my favorite time of the year as well. Uh,
Yay!
I think last year I chose the Weasleys. I was pretty sure I went with the Weasleys, but this year I'm sticking very on brand. And I am going with The Inner Circle from Court of Mist and Fury, because that's when you meet them. This was the book that like hooked me, because I've talked to you a little bit about this. I thought ACOTAR was fine, but this book, I love this book so, so much. It has been such a joy for me this year. And a good part of why it is the friendship and found family in this book. I think it's just excellent. And it makes you want to be a part of it. You just sit on the periphery and you're like, oh, I want to be there. I want to have dinner with them and hang out with them. So that was my choice. Nothing as beautifully evocative as your choice, but this
Oh, no,
I
I think
wanted
it's
it.
perfect because I know you've said that many times that the
Mhm.
found family element is powerful in that series.
Yeah, I love it, honestly. I think it's one of the things that I am noticing in romantasy that is a key trope within that genre is the found family, and I think for the most part it's done pretty well. But I really, really love it in this series. Like I already want to reread this, and I just reread it.
How many times have you reread that series, Laura?
I think I'm on like 5 or 6 this year alone. So, because I only read it for the first time in March. So, yeah,
This
it's just
year?
been, yeah, I love it. And once I start, I just go all the way through. I can't stop. I can't stop. I just find it
Wow.
so fun. It's such a comfort thing for me now, which I think leans into this question, right? It's a comfort thing. You feel like you know these people or you want to know these people at a deeper level. So, yeah, that for me is probably my choice. There's a good friends group in the Emma Lyon books. Yeah, he's been talking about the Emma Lyon books that look really good. So I do want to
Oh,
check those out as
okay.
well.
Take a
Um,
look into that.
the Weasleys is a solid choice. I agree. I think the Weasleys are pretty great, but I couldn't pick the Weasleys 2 years in a row as much as I might have wanted to. The Addams Family. That's true. I would totally accept that. And they're from the comics originally, so that works very, very well. Hills Found Family and Family of Friends. Nice. Joanna, it's an addiction she can.
You're being called out.
I don't think I can. I think it is an addiction at this point, but it's an addiction that I am happy to have. Um, Yes, I know that she has been loving Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is such a tongue twister for me to say. I really do want to check out those books. Have you any interest in reading those books?
I haven't, no, I have not looked into it. It
Mhm.
hasn't been at the top of my list, but no, maybe someday.
How come my favorite friend group is not the Sailor Scouts? Have you seen how dysfunctional that group of girls are? I love them all, but
The Sailor
highly,
Moon?
highly dysfunctional. Yes. Yeah, I would still count Sailor Pluto. I still count Pluto as a planet. I am of that group of people. So I don't care what NASA has to say about it. That is my personal opinion. All right, number 5. The colorful leaves are piling up on the ground to show us a pile of fall colored spines. Again, I misread that and just read colorful spines. So,
Don't really have, that set up right now.
that's
I'm
fine.
sorry,
That's fine.
but
I will show people colorful spines, which is what I went with.
there you go.
They are not fall colored by any means. They are just colorful, and it is
Oh,
my
those are
Emily Henry
beautiful.
books. Yeah, these are my Emily Henrys.
Here's some colorful spines
Those
in
are
your book
more
cycle.
autumnal and more on brand, so well done you. And most people know I have gone on my Emily Henry kick this year. And it's funny because normally I find them very bright for the look of most of my shelves. And I just stare at them sometimes and I'm like, you guys don't really belong anywhere. But simultaneously, I'm like, but you belong everywhere. It's a weird feeling that, like, because most fantasy books aren't this color.
Yeah, I could see that looking at your shelves right now. You have all
Yeah.
these, like, gorgeous,
They're
warm hued
monochromatic,
books.
basically, yeah, and these ones, they stick out quite a bit, which is fine, but they're very
Actually, your
good.
whole bookshelf looks very autumnal to me, so
Thank you. I'll just save my shelves then.
yeah, there you
I guess
go.
that's the answer. Ah,
I have my Dune book in the background, that's kind of autumnal looking a little
perfect.
bit.
I think that absolutely works. I would definitely go with Dune. Um, Princess Joanna. Off topic. What's your favorite book of all time, Joanna? No pressure.
Favorite book of all time? I'm not answering that. I don't know.
I don't think I could pick just one.
Yeah, not right
Um,
now. I have to
what's
think
your
about
favorite
that.
book of the moment? What's your favorite book of the moment?
Uh, I mean, I always talk about Stoner.
You
That's
do?
definitely one of my favorite books,
Yep. I
but
would
it's
say
not the
that's a good
only
choice for you.
one.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I love The Crippled God, which is the
Mhm.
last book in Malazan.
Yeah.
I love all of A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes.
I don't even know if I could choose a book, honestly, in that
I
series,
don't think I could either, really, like, or just
but I'm
picking a book.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm watching House of the Dragon finally,
Are you?
finally. Yeah, just
Okay.
season 1, and I'm, like, in awe of Martin. I'm in awe of him. I'm like, "Can
Mhm.
anybody do what he does?" Like, even though I
Not
haven't read
really.
Fire and Blood yet, I just the
I'm eager for
story
you to read it. I am
I
really
will,
curious
I
as to
will.
what your thoughts are gonna be when you read it. We'll have a lot to discuss.
Oh, he's such a brilliant writer, and I love Dune, by the way. Dune is
Mhm.
high on my list of favorite books too. I have a
Yeah.
lot of favorite books, but I haven't really compiled ranking orders or figured it
Yeah.
out.
I would say at the moment, probably Enemy of God.
Oh, that's another amazing one. Yeah,
Yeah, that for me has just I love Enemy of God so, so,
and
so,
you got
so.
After Philip last night, right?
I did.
Good.
It was this beautiful transition in which, he recounted this beautiful Old English thing, and I was like, "Speaking of Old English stuff, Warlord Chronicles, Philip." So, yeah, he is committed on there for, you have a translator here in the chat, and it's Jimmy to 2025, but yeah, I'd point to my nice. Yes. Emily Henry. I those are first law covers behind you. They are bright. Where are they now? Yes, they're right there. But Joe Abercrombie can do whatever he wants, so it's fine. He gets free reign to give whatever color for a cover he wants. I will never be upset about it. Yes, in our hearts. What's one of your favorites? One of my favorite what's
Books.
Matt books. I
Yeah,
think we probably answered that.
yeah.
Um, got Last Light of the Sun by GGK. Very autumnal. That's a good one. We're on about Pluto again. I am very excited for people here. Shocking, Evie. Absolutely shocking.
We're
Never
all
would have guessed that
surprised,
for you. Very base, Joanna. I'm assuming that's Stoner.
probably.
uh,
I feel so
fine.
yeah, I don't know, I just keep coming back to I feel like, can I move on? Maybe
I think
someday.
that's okay though. Obviously, it means that that book has stuck with you in such a profound way, which is the point of reading, right?
There are certain stories that just stay with me over time, and then I never get tired of hearing people talk about them, so
Mhm.
I get excited all over again.
Mhm. Philip's agreeing. Perfect segue, which I was very happy about. Yeah, Simon has preferred the Vanished Birds, so happy to answer that question.
I preferred The Vanished Birds too, I feel kinda bad to say it, but I did think that The Spirit Cuts Through Water was actually more of a feat, like, it was more
Yeah,
innovative. Um,
I
I'm
am curious
impressed
to
with
read it at some point. I don't feel that urgency to go read it right now, if that makes sense. It's kind of how I felt with Scott Lynch. I loved The Lies of Locke Lamora, and I was like, it felt very complete for me, so I don't need to jump into the next book right away, type
So
thing.
I was laughing about this recently because my husband just finished The Lies of Locke Lamora, and
Hmm.
while he was reading the book, he kept on mentioning certain scenes and
Yeah,
certain plot moments, and I couldn't remember any of
any
them
of
because I
it.
haven't read the book since, like, 2019,
Okay.
2018, and I just didn't remember. I remember
Mhm.
certain things, but I
Yeah.
couldn't remember anything he was mentioning, and then he finished the book, and he said, "That was really good," and I said, "Isn't it
Mhm.
amazing?" And he said, "You don't
Yeah.
even remember it." So
What are
yeah, I love Scott Lynch's writing. I would say
Mhm.
though that, even though I don't remember anything and I'm due for a reread of book 1,
Yeah,
I felt pretty comfortable treating those books like
sure.
standalones
Yep.
and reading them with a lot of space between. So I think you're in good shape for
Yeah, I think
putting
it'll
some
be okay.
time. Mhm. Yeah.
Rodman's asking, what are your favorite nonfiction books?
Mm, yeah. So my favorites are Behave and Determined, like I mentioned, the Sapolsky books, love those.
Mhm.
Another one that's one of my favorites right now is
Mhm.
one I mentioned, I think, last year. It's called Disfigured. So
Yeah.
it's oh gosh, I'm trying to see where it is on my shelf, but it's basically about representation in fantasy, and it goes historically in the history of fantasy, like going back to the old fairy stories or fairy tales,
Mhm.
and about the ways that physiognomy occurs, the ways that we attribute certain physical characteristics
Sure.
to moral characteristics,
Ooh.
like the Wicked Witch always looking like an old crone, and
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty or Snow White or Disney's the worst about it, making these, like,
Without question, yes.
virtuous characters being beautiful.
Uh,
Yes, it was a powerful read, though. I highly recommend it to everyone. Um, and I also love Know My Name by Chanel Miller, also a must read, I think. Yeah, there are several that I love, but those are a few that come to mind.
Nice. My answer last year is still probably at the top for this, which is Maybe You Should Talk to Somebody by Lori Gottlieb, which is a therapist's experience with her patients. And I loved it. As someone who I'm a big advocate for therapy, I talked about it in our video last year. I will talk about it now. I've been in therapy for the majority of my life. I love therapy. I think everyone should go to therapy. And it was a really wonderful experience to show how everyone at every stage of their life can benefit from therapy and what therapy can do for people, including the therapist. And I really loved that. And I would say, in terms of other nonfiction, most things by Mary Beard for me, pulling in my Roman history love there would be probably top. The Roman Triumph by Mary Beard would probably be that
Mm.
top book for me. I really loved it. And I can't remember his name right now. I'm trying to see it from my shelf here. But The Ark Before Noah is another really good nonfiction book for people that are interested in the flood myths, which I was. So that would
Oh,
be
cool.
my
Yeah.
answers.
Oh, and just to answer that question about Disfigured, I think Evie already answered it, but
Mhm.
Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space is by Amanda Leduc. And I just cannot say enough good things about it. I was so impressed with it. I was so impressed with the
Mhm.
way it made me look at stories differently,
That's
especially in the
awesome.
fantasy genre.
Yeah, I love that. I would probably be interested in reading that. Okay. Fall is the perfect time for some storytelling by the fireside. Share a book wherein somebody is telling a story.
You want me to go first or do you want to go first?
I can go first because I know you'll appreciate my answer.
All right.
The Winter King by Ron
Yes. Oh,
Turtle.
that's a great one.
When I saw this question, I immediately was like, Turtle.
Terrible. Yeah.
uh, this series This series. Oh my God, this series. I can't
So
stop
good.
talking about it. If anyone has watched my videos in the last few months, you know I keep gushing about the Warlord Chronicles. It's just phenomenal. And it this whole series, when I started Winter King, I can't remember if I messaged you, but I was like, I've started it. It's taking me a little while to get into it. And I will say Winter King is the slowest, I feel, of all the books to get into because there are a lot of graphic things that happen in the beginning of this book. And it wasn't what I expected at all. And this always makes me laugh because when I told you I was about to start Warlord Chronicles, you sent me that gif of Merlin dancing from the Disney movie. And in my brain, I was like, oh, like fun and whimsical Merlin. That must be what I'm going to be reading.
No,
And
that was
then,
supposed to represent me being excited, but
yeah.
I
And then I
yeah.
totally misread that. So when I started this book, I was like, this is not whimsical at all. Like, you
Well, I did put
know?
that Merlin on my thumbnail of my
Yes.
review, and I put red eyes. I tried to make his eyes red. I don't know
Yes,
if that came through.
exactly. Which very appropriate. But this was just arguably the best Arthurian telling that I have ever experienced. I love it. We still have to read Mary Stuart.
Yes,
That's
that's
on
on the list. We're gonna have to read that in 2025, yes?
2025. That's on the
Yeah.
list. And this book is a recounting of a man named Derval who has become a Christian. He is retelling his life next to Arthur, and oh, what a life it is. It's just so beautifully told. All three books are just fantastic. I love them so much. I already want to reread them. I love this series so much. So this is my choice for number 6.
The audiobooks to that are also phenomenal. I know
Incredible.
Alan is rereading via audio right
He just
now.
finished.
Oh,
He
he
just
did?
finished. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So good, and I cannot wait for Philip to read them, and
Same.
I've been teasing Philip because he just chose a book for his Illuminati. I call it Illuminati. I know that's not
Yep.
what it's called. His bro club,
Yep.
his bro club book club,
Uh,
and he chose a different Cornwell book. He chose the first book
First,
in the other
it's The
series,
Last Kingdom. Yeah.
but he already read that, and I'm like, "Philip." I guess everybody in that club already read Warlord, but so I can't
I see. I will
be
say,
too disappointed.
Last Kingdom is good. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard
Warlord
it's nowhere near
Chronicles.
as good as Warlord. Yeah,
Yeah, still very good, but I just
yeah.
think that the, character richness is much deeper in Warlord.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I always say the same thing. The book 1 is the slowest to get into. There's a lot of exposition in the first half of the
Mhm,
book, but it does pick up. It picks up quite a bit towards the end. So,
mhm.
yeah, a lot of
Promise
people
I'll
need it.
read.
Quilluminati. Okay.
Yeah,
Quilluminati bros.
it's close. You're close enough. So, what is your choice for number 6?
Hyperion by Dan
Hey!
Simmons.
I
I've
really
only
wanna read
read this.
Hyperion. I really wanna read it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's
Mhm,
very, very well written, and it does tell the tale. Well, it's 5 people telling their stories. So it does have that framed outer story of these 5
mhm,
people who get together to go on this pilgrimage on the planet Hyperion
mhm,
to encounter the mysterious Shrike creature, and then you find out their backstories. So each of them give their backstories, and my favorite is the priest's tale, which
mhm.
is the first tale in here, probably followed by The Scholar's Tale, which is a
Yeah,
really emotional one. There were a couple of stories, I'll be honest, that I was not crazy about, that
sure.
it just didn't really work for me,
Mhm,
but I think that it was beautifully written, really, really well written. And it's
mhm,
funny because I was talking about this book. I did a Dark Tower collab with Jonathan from Words in Time
mhm,
and, Josh from Red Fury, and, Words in Time loved the Dark Tower series. That was a series I recommended to him, and the weird
mhm,
thing is he was drawing some parallels between the Dark Tower series and Hyperion, and
mm.
I agree. There are so many weird parallels, even a weird
Interesting.
Wizard of Oz parallel.
Huh,
So, I think if you like one, then you might like the other, especially
sure.
because both authors, both Stephen King and,
Mhm,
Dan Simmons, seem to love references to other works of literature. So there's a lot of, like, John Keats references, as
mhm.
well as other references. Beowulf is mentioned in it. I know Philip already
Oh.
read the book, so I don't have to tell
Mhm.
him to read this one. But,
Yeah,
yeah, there are a lot of different references in the stories, and it's extremely well written in my opinion. So, yeah, I
that's
enjoyed it.
awesome.
Mhm.
I am excited to read that. Multiple people have told me that they think I would really like Hyperion, so, it's on my list. The never-ending list, as we know,
Yeah.
it's always, 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 always growing. Okay, so a bit of a stretch, The Black Company series by Glenn Cook. I also really want to read this. I have picked it up twice at a bookstore, and I was like, "It's so much cheaper if I order it online." So, I do plan on starting Glenn Cook pretty soon. Have you read any Glenn Cook?
No, I haven't, but I know he was a big influence on Steven Erikson. Like,
Mm.
Steven Erikson even dedicated one of the Malazan books, if not multiple Malazan books to Glenn
Wow,
Cook. So I know
nice.
that that was a big influence, yeah.
Sure. Wizard and Glass, Stephen King.
Amazing book, and absolutely fantastic, uh, story within a story in that book
Mhm.
too. Yes.
So this is interesting, Empire of the Vampire. I have been using my library a lot more lately because I just got my new shelves and I'm already like, I don't wanna run out of space. And I thought I took out Empire of the Vampire and I checked out the 2nd book by accident. So I need to go back and get book 1, and actually give it a go. Uh, what else is here? I do misread regularly. This is why if I don't have my glasses on, oh, good luck.
I do too.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they're right here, but yeah, it's fair game a lot of the time. Josh will look at something if we're reading a good night book to our daughter. If I don't have my glasses on, it's a whole different story. Some of them are
Funny.
memorized for that exact reason. And I'm like, otherwise, good luck. Obviously, Assassin's Apprentice.
That's funny.
Mary Stuart's Arthurian books are gorgeous. My mom says the same thing. They are her absolute favorites, and she is an Arthurian nut. She's also read Warlord and loved it. She and Josh read Warlord probably like 7 or 8 years ago, and just she rereads Mary Stuart like every other year. She really, really loves.
Have you watched Bridger from the Library Ladder? He did a whole entire Arthurian fantasy
No, I
or
haven't.
Arthurian stories video.
Mhm.
Have you seen that?
I haven't,
Oh,
no.
I have to send it to you. You have to watch. I think
Okay.
you're gonna love it.
Probably
But
will, yeah.
he put Mary Stewart's books at the top of his list. Those are
Yeah.
his favorites. Alongside, he loves Warlord as well. Warlord was really high up there as well. But I
Nice.
think you would love that video because he goes
Probably,
into a
yeah.
lot of detail and a lot of history.
Love that.
Fantastic video.
Absolutely love that. Yeah, Arabian Nights is a good choice. I love Arabian Nights. Shriek by Jeff Vandermeer. Nice. I
Cool.
haven't read anything by him
Me
yet.
neither. Not yet.
Something Wicked This Way Comes. I know a lot of people have loved this book this year, so that is not surprising.
And everyone recommends it for October
Yeah,
as an
it's been a
October
big
read.
thing. I think you probably would, Matt, based on what everyone is saying. I'm starting Empire of the Damned today. Nice. Perfect. The Last Kingdom is fine. I agree. It's fine. I'm highlighting this again, so we have the promise multiple times that Warlord Chronicles. We should start our own Illuminati ladies reboot. I'm fine with that. Just let us
We
know, you.
should.
I think that would be great. I don't recommend the Girl Quest though. Yeah, I just finished Hyperion.
It's really good, isn't it? Did you like it? Did you like it, Britton?
Oh, interesting, Simon. We have
Yeah,
strong.
there are a lot of mixed feelings. I've heard from a lot of people that the fall of Hyperion is incredible. Like some people love it even more than Hyperion, but then some
Mhm.
people feel the exact opposite. They do not like
Yeah, I've seen
fall of
kind of one or
Hyperion.
the other. Jimmy, it seems to be working. So, will you read The Fall of Hyperion next?
Yeah. I do need to get to it. I don't know if I'll read it immediately.
Mhm.
Probably it might be 2025, but I do intend to get to it.
I loved the Are You
Yes.
Afraid of the Dark books. Oh,
Yes.
they are so good. Oh, what a
Yes.
time.
I
What a
love
vibe.
those books, and the show.
Yes,
Yeah.
so good. Oh,
Mhm.
likely 1, 2, 3. I mentioned Book Thief. I didn't see a mention of that. I
I
did
didn't
not.
see it either. I didn't see
Jimmy,
the
I would never time you out. No, it did not come through.
I know he's reading The Book Thief right now, though, so I don't know if
Mhm.
he's
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Return of Screw Frames, the novel is a story of fire. Nice. Um, yeah. Lots of I'm trying to catch up on comments, guys. I'm doing my absolute best. I'm sorry. Wizards and Glass, probably the best Dark Tower novel. Yeah. Hello, Marianne. Nice to have you here. Okay. So let's see where we're at now. That was yes.
Um,
Question 6. So, okay, this is my answer that is highly dubious. So I will let you go first.
okay, well, I'm not very far along, but I'm
Mhm.
currently reading It by Stephen King.
That is completely legit. Yours is a
Yeah,
legit answer. Yeah, mine is
yeah. I'm
not.
not the most well-read when it comes to horror, but Stephen King, that counts. This counts, and it'll be
Yes.
a while before I finish it, but yes,
Mhm.
that's gonna be my answer for that.
Nice. So mine is it's a romance novel. So hear me out. It's Butcher and Blackbird, which
Oh, yeah, yeah.
is
Because you said it
a
had Dexter vibes.
oh, 100%. It's serial killers killing serial killers. And she gets quite graphic with a lot of the killing scenes. So that is the darker, creepier aspect, I would stuff. And some of the people that they kill, you get the reasonings behind how they killed it, like and why and stuff. So that for me would probably be the darkest thing I read this year. I also read its sequel, which was also equally murdery. But these two books would probably be the ones that I chose. I will say though, I have very dark humor, and this book is super humorous. So while it is creepy and dark, I think it's hysterical, and I loved it.
So is it like a gallows humor? So, like, gore
Yes,
humor or
it's
kind of thing?
kinda if you've if you've watched The Sopranos and you found The Sopranos to be funny, you will find this book funny. Like, that's the type of humor I would say that it is. It's grim humor. So yes, I
Yeah.
would say gallows humor.
I do like grim humor. I didn't get into The Sopranos, though. I tried, like, 1 or 2 episodes and just wasn't feeling it.
Yeah, not for everybody.
But I loved Dexter, at least up until the John Lithgow season. I
Season
think it
I
was
can't
season
watch
4.
that because I love him so much, and I'm like, "I can't look at you that way."
Oh, he was the best, though.
Ugh,
He yeah, he elevated that series, in my opinion.
he's a
Every
so
series
good.
after his appearance, though, were not as good.
Not as good.
But if
That's
you
the
just
thing.
watch the first, like I think
Mhm.
it's the 4th season,
It
if
is
I'm
the
not
4th season,
mistaken.
yeah. John Lithgow is one of my favorite actors ever. He is the person that, as a kid, made me decide that I loved comedy because I loved Third Rock from the Sun so much, and he was the
Ah,
reason I loved that show.
yeah.
So, for me, he is such an integral part of my childhood that I'm like, "I can't look at you as a serial killer that does very awful things. I just can't."
Yeah.
So I can't watch that, but I appreciate everyone who can, and I know that for sure he won like a ton of awards for that performance because everyone was raving about how excellent it was. So
Yeah.
yes, but you might not hate this then.
No, yeah, because
Yeah.
I loved Dexter for that, like I said, for
Yeah. I
those
really
seasons.
loved the banter in this book. I will say I think she does banter phenomenally well. And yeah, dark, grim, grimy, and sometimes like audibly made me go, oh, but it was really, really good.
And I
So
think
but
didn't Kelsey, Jimmy's wife, love it? I think
yes,
she
she
said that in
did.
Chatting
And
with
when I
Nuts.
hung out with the two of them, we went to a bookstore and she and I managed to get the sequel a few days early. So that was really great.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know yet if she has actually read the sequel. Last I checked in with her, she hadn't read it, but I am curious if she has. So either way, I'm trying to play catch up here. Perfect creepy read, Joanna. Yes, it I think encompasses the entirety of the season.
Yes, I'll and I can't even I haven't said what it's about, but it's about this death that happens at the beginning of the story involving this creepy clown in this town, Derry, Maine. And then I guess these kids come together later in life and they're still haunted by some sort of creepy aspect here.
Yeah,
But that's all I have to say. I think everybody knows it, but at this point, um,
probably.
but I actually am going into this with pretty fresh eyes. I did
Nice.
watch an adaptation when I was a kid, but I don't really
Mhm.
remember anything except that there was a creepy clown. That's all I remember.
Yeah, I can't do those, honestly. They creep me out way too much. It's just not my type of thing. And I know some people are like, "Well, you could just try it." I'm like, "No." It's
Well,
just
I do recommend, Pet Sematary, though,
I know you
I don't
do.
know. That one, you have to be careful. I'm glad I didn't read Pet Sematary this year because it would've
Yeah,
been too much.
yeah.
But that particular book is different. Like, this one is horror, like,
Mhm.
really terrifying horror, gore, that kinda thing. But, like, jump scare horror, I would say, is
Sure.
in here. But Pet Sematary is more of, like, a psychological horror, and it's
That for me is worse, the
yeah, it might be worse.
psychological. Yeah, so it's interesting because my writers group, one of the people in it, Caleb, Celebrity is his channel, he writes horror.
Mm.
And when we started, I said to him, I was like, "Listen, straight up, I have not read any horror before." And he's like, "Well, you did okay with like A Song of Ice and Fire and you love Joe Abercrombie. So in terms of like people being maimed and tortured and all that kind of stuff, like that doesn't really seem to bother you." And I was like, "No, it doesn't." And then I was like, "But as soon as there's a psychological aspect, yes." Like it
Yeah.
does bother me. So that's my line. It's that animals and psychological stuff, no. Humans and no psychological reasoning, fine.
Yeah.
It
I don't
makes
know.
no sense.
I haven't really figured out my own mind with that. Like, there's a
Mhm.
lot of gory stuff that happens in the Spear That Cuts Through Water or Spear Cuts Through
Yes,
Water, sorry.
which I was
And
fine with.
I actually I struggled with it.
Interesting.
I
That's so
did. I
interesting, yeah.
struggled with it. Like, being trampled and stuff, like,
Yep.
it it bothered me for some reason. Like, it
Mm,
and maybe part of it is just the way it's written, uh,
maybe.
with the breaking of, like, kind of the way that the chorus feature of the story,
Yeah,
I don't wanna say more than that, is
yeah.
written, in which the characters are speaking through the story, and
Mhm.
for some reason, it just got under my skin more.
That's
So,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
that was a big part of our, book club conversation and in terms of if the gore in the book bothered people or not, and I had no issues with it.
That's good.
Which I thought
Yeah.
I was going to, just based on what people were kind of warning me about,
Mhm.
but it ended up being a non-issue for me. Had there been a psychological aspect though, or a dog, would have been a different story. Absolutely different thing. The night circus isn't really creepy, but it's night themed and very, very good.
Mm.
Nice. Speaking of King, The Body, and Shawshank Redemption. Oh, I love Shawshank. And yes, that is a very good one that is told by a character in the book. Absolutely. Have
That's one
you?
of my, brother's favorite movies.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And the thing, have you read the novella?
I haven't. Have you?
Yes, many
Oh,
times. I've probably read that novella like 6 or 7 times. I absolutely adore it. But the thing I loved about it so much is because King wrote the screenplay, they just it's arguably one of the best adaptations ever because he just took it and expanded scenes and added a few new characters for the film, and it just seamlessly it flows so well from novella to screen. It's beautifully done. I absolutely love it.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Is Dexter Vibes good? I mean, if you like serial killers hunting other serial killers, then yes, it's good
I
vibes.
got a kick out of it, at least for the first few seasons. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's creepy and more horrible and more horrifying. Yeah, Parable of the Sower. I would agree. I would completely agree with that, Evie. Maybe something by Voltaire. Let me see here. Yeah, maybe. Anthology of Arctic horror stories. Interesting.
Hmm.
I am curious about this. That is Robert Aikman. Are you a short story fan in general?
I didn't used to be, but this year I am, I guess.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
I ended up reading Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and that
Mhm.
is now one of my favorite stories of all time.
Nice.
Loved it. I know it's often being compared to Stoner by John Williams.
I wonder
So,
why you love it then, Joanna.
yeah, I would say it's a bit darker than Stoner, but
Okay.
it's powerful. It's powerful. It's definitely one of those stories, it's like a warning to the living. So it's
Mhm.
actually kind of creepy in its own way, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I also read Ken Liu's The Paper Menagerie short story collection.
Yep.
Loved that collection.
Mhm.
And then also A Good Man Is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor.
Nice.
So I the short stories I have read, I have loved. I've also read a couple of Conan short stories in the past,
Nice.
which I've enjoyed. And there's one by W.E.B. Du Bois called The Comet, which is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess I do love short
I
stories, and
think
I don't know
you
why I
do
never
really
get around to
like
watching
short
them.
stories. Yeah, I'm still not in that vibe yet, but I haven't given it much of an effort. I
Yeah, that's
feel
the thing
like.
is, like, I have a hard time making the effort to read short stories, but then
Mhm.
when I do, the payoff is always so high, at least for the
Mhm.
ones I've read so far.
Yeah, I've read Ted Chiang in the last year, and that's probably the only short stories that I've read, and it was Hell is the Absence of God, was the main one that I read, which I found fine. I found it was a short story that would definitely hit differently depending on where you are in your faith journey, if you have a faith. And if you have a lack of faith, that is a very different way of reading it as well.
Oh, I
So,
I love stories like that, so I bet
yeah,
I would
so it
love
was
it.
interesting. You might enjoy it. I would say based on what you just told me, you would probably really enjoy it.
Yeah,
But I
and
did read. Go ahead.
I did read The Ice Dragon this year,
Yes, you
and that's
did.
almost a short story. I mean, it's really,
Yeah.
really short. I
Mhm.
actually have been reading a lot of shorter fiction this year,
Yeah.
and have been enjoying that.
Do you think that's been intentional?
No, it hasn't. It's been
Mhm.
so strange. None of the shorter books that I've read this year have been on my TBR initially. And
Mm.
so it just ended up
Interesting.
that I kind of wanted to taste test different things, and that seemed to be an easy way to do it. The Paper Menagerie was a little different because Kyle kind of got after me to buy it when I was traveling
Yes.
last summer or
Yeah.
last year, and then he went ahead and set up a buddy read, and it was with himself, with Evie, who was in the chat, and Bookborn, and the
Yep.
three of them had already read it. So they
Yeah.
were rereading it, and I was the only one reading it for the first time. But because it was a structured buddy read, like we
Mhm.
had like 1 to 2 stories a week,
Yeah.
for me, that made it far more approachable.
Sure.
Otherwise, I don't know, I probably would have done the worst at, like, completing it and starting
Yeah.
it. But I think that works really well. I think that's smart to do that. But yeah, it hasn't been intentional on my part to be reading so much short fiction. But
Mhm.
maybe I've just needed that. Maybe I've just something
Yeah.
psychologically has needed that with all the epic fantasy that I've been reading. So
Yes. The Rogue, it is Hell is the Absence of God by Ted Chiang, and I believe the anthology it's in is called Stories of Your Life. That's what it is. But yeah, Ted Chiang. Yeah, Hell is the Absence of God, Ted Chiang.
I'll check it
Absolutely.
out. I think I'd love it.
Yeah, I think you probably would too. Bookborn is the one that put me on to that because she absolutely really, really loves that
Yeah.
collection, but she loves that book the most. Okay. The days are getting colder. Name a short, heartwarming read that could warm up somebody's cold and rainy day.
That is so hard for me because I do not read a lot of heartwarming reads. Oh, I do
Same.
have a good one though. I have one I forgot. Do you
What
wanna
is
go
it?
first?
What was that?
You wanna go first?
You can go.
Okay. I actually have a couple. Okay, I do have a couple of answers to this.
Hmm.
To give you a fantasy choice, I did start the Lloyd Alexander. This is the Black Cauldron.
I
What is this
love the
called?
cover
The
of that
Pain.
so
Isn't it
much.
cute? I'm trying to get it to focus. Let me see if I can get it to focus.
Oh yeah,
The
that's great.
Prydain Chronicles. This is the one that the movie was based on. This is book
Mhm.
2. I picked this up thanks to Bridger from Library Ladder, but then I found out this was a huge influence on Philip.
Mm.
So yes, and I love the writing in this. And in fact, this story already gave me autumn vibes. Like the opening of this, if can I read just the first part of it, even though I'm
Absolutely.
gonna butcher some pronunciations here?
Absolutely.
It says
Butcher away.
here, autumn had come too swiftly. In the northernmost realms of Prydain, many trees were already leafless, and among the branches clung the ragged shapes of empty nests. That's just the opening line, and
That's
I could go on, but
amazing.
I
I love
already
that.
just love the flow of that
Yeah.
writing. It's so
Evocative.
evocative, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and it's middle grade, like, it's a middle grade fantasy story, but I think it's very well written, and it pulled me in, especially this one. This one was a lot better
Mhm.
than book 1. Book
Yeah.
1, the first one, the oh, what is it called? The Book of 3 is the name of the first book,
Mhm.
and that particular book is a really good introduction to the characters and to the world,
Mhm.
but it wasn't necessarily it wasn't amazing for me, it
Sure.
was okay, it was just a good introduction book, but
Mhm.
this book took it to a new level. I could see why they adapted this particular book.
Sure. Over
Um,
the others.
yeah, I thought it was extremely charming
Oh,
and
I love
delightful
that.
and perfect for the fall season too.
That's the best. I did not pick a fantasy book for this one. I chose a contemporary romance.
Nice.
And I chose Thank You for Listening by Julia Whalen. Julia Whalen is
Yes, I
by
know who she is.
day an
Mhm.
audiobook narrator. She's
I've
done
listened to
over
several of her
600 books.
audiobooks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she's incredible. I love her so much. She narrates every single one of Emily Henry's books. That's how I encountered her at first. But I joined a book club in the real life world because I wanted to try to meet new people. And the only one that sounded remotely interesting to me was the romance book club. So our first book that I read for that was Thank You for Listening. And it is semi autobiographical in the sense that it is about a audiobook narrator, and you get this really interesting behind the scenes as to what it is like to be in the audiobook world, the fears of AI coming in, how a lot of romance narrators don't go by their actual names because there's privacy stuff going on, but the banter in this book was excellent. I loved the dynamic between the two characters. It's a quick listen, it's a quick read. And also it's probably one of the only times I've encountered a main character in a romance that has a disability. So I really loved that. And I found it ticked all the boxes in terms of inclusivity, humor, just a good time reading. It made me laugh, it made me feel things. So that would be my choice. It was a really, really good book. I enjoyed it.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I love that audiobook narrator. I've listened to
Mhm.
a few of her stories, and I think she's
Yeah,
gotten better. Did she do Happy Place?
she did. Yeah.
She did a phenomenal job. I
Mhm.
loved her narration of that
Yeah.
book.
She does
Um,
all of Emily Henry's romance books. I don't know about her previous books that she wrote. She did YA novels first, but that's the thing. Like I almost wonder for people that have read some of Emily Henry's books that it hasn't resonated with them. I'm like, I wonder if you had listened, if it maybe would have resonated with you a little bit more, just because I know with certain scenes in particular books, I feel that the way she delivers it is just so compelling. And yeah, I think it's a really good
I
pairing
think
for
she
both of
captured
them.
the tone perfectly in that story,
Yeah.
and I have listened to other books by her, like, for example, I listened to the book The Great Alone. Is it Hannah Kristen Hannah, I think is the name of the author? I
Mhm.
can't remember. And I listened to another book that she narrated as well, and I think she's grown as a narrator, honestly, because I
Yeah.
think she was good in that book. I feel like she's better now.
Mhm.
I think she's better now.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm imagining that. So,
Probably not. I will say if anyone does decide to give Thank You for Listening a try, I highly recommend doing the audiobook because there is an entire plot line of accents in that story that you will not get to experience it the same way if you physically read it as you will listening to it.
yeah.
And it enhances the story. It's just so, so good. So I loved Thank You for Listening. Those, I mean, Derry, this isn't surprising. I would have said any Discworld book for Derry for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I do wanna read more Discworld.
Yes.
I do have speaking of accents, though, I do have one that's not fantasy I would recommend in this category, and
Mhm.
that would be Claire Keegan's book, Foster.
Okay.
Claire Keegan is an incredible Irish author,
Mhm.
and the book Foster is about a little girl who ends up being fostered to these childless parents for a summer. The parents are relatives of her family. And I can't say anything because it's so short, it would give it
Yeah.
away. But it's heartwarming and it's poignant and it's also heartbreaking all at once.
Mhm.
But it's so beautifully written. It's so powerful. I think that Claire Keegan is one of those extraordinary authors who could say so much with so few
Mhm.
words,
I love
and
that.
I love the Irish settings in her
Yes.
stories, and I love the audiobooks because the 2 I've
Mhm.
read so far, which is Small Things Like These and Foster that I listened to via audio, both of
Mhm.
the narrators, which were different narrators, had incredible Irish accents, and I
Mhm.
felt like they just transported me. Like, I felt so
Aw.
transported as a result of that, so I feel like
Yeah.
it would have it's better served for me via audio because of that
Mhm.
accent than if I were to read it visually.
Yeah, that's actually it's funny you say Irish because that is one of the accents in Thank You for Listening.
Oh, cool.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny because having just listened to her do Emily Henry's books, I was like, they're all Americanized voices. But then I listened to Thank You for Listening, and she does a beautiful Irish accent. And then I went and I listened to her other book, which is called My Oxford Year, and she does a phenomenal British accent for that too, like a poshy Oxford accent.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's incredible. I love her.
And Matt said that he was thinking of Keegan's Small Things Like These, which I read earlier
Mhm.
this year, and that would actually be a really good one that I would recommend at Christmas time. If
Okay.
anyone wants a good Christmas time story, that is the perfect Christmas time story because it takes
Mhm.
place at Christmas time, and it's
Yeah.
very short. You could read it in a day, in a sitting, in an afternoon via audiobook if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah,
Kristen
phenomenal.
definitely agrees with you.
Yay.
Have you guys ever read any Dan May novels like Heaven Official's Blessing? I have not.
Mm-mm.
I have not. I've never even heard of them.
Me neither.
Please tell me more about them. The W. Fell Off Whale Rider. Nice. Um, yeah, Wizard of Earthsea. I haven't done any Earthsea yet. I have the first book, but I haven't read it yet.
I would love to at some point, but I also feel a little bit more drawn to Le Guin's sci-fi because
That's
I
fair.
read, The Dispossessed earlier this year.
Yep, I
I
remember Alan's
loved
experience
it.
and your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, very contrasting experiences,
Yeah.
but there are so many other sci-fi books that just sound a little more interesting to me, but
Yeah.
I know that Wizard of Earthsea is excellent too, so
Mhm.
my
For
husband read
sure.
the first 2 and loved those
Oh,
2.
nice.
So,
I love
yeah.
that. Awesome. Our last question, which is fall returns every year. Name an old favorite that you'd like to return to
Oh,
soon.
gosh. Old favorite. Oh, I'm gonna be so basic. I'm gonna be so, so basic, and I'm just gonna say Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
Uh, That's so basic. I wanna think
I
of a different book, but
Mine's not that old, but I went with The Lions of Valor Song by Guy
yes.
Gabriel Kay, because we read this last year, and I loved this book so much, and I think about this book regularly.
Yeah.
So I want to definitely read it again. I just felt like really from start to finish, this book is just top tier, top tier. I loved it.
I'm
So
trying so hard to get my mom to read that book right now
I
because,
think you'd love
we
it.
have Spanish blood, and she
Yes.
has a lot of knowledge about Spanish history and, of course, knows about El Cid. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Please read it, mom, please." And so I'm
Well,
trying to get her to read it, and she
based
started it and
on
loved it, but she's
yeah.
just been always so busy. But
Mm.
yes, I love that book. It's still up there for me. I think that's my number 2 favorite K book so far.
Still my number one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't read as much as you have with Kay because I DNF'd Tiana. And then I'm hoping to probably do the Sarantine Mosaic some point early next year, maybe. But yeah, this one will be hard to top for me just in terms of setting because I love the setting for this book so, so much. And the characters are so
And they
good.
are good, huh?
So good.
Yes.
And this book has one of my favorite talk about a romantasy. Here's a romantasy, people. It has one of my favorite pairings ever with Miranda and Rodrigo.
Miranda
Like
Rodrigo.
they are such an incredible couple. I friggin' love them so much. So yeah, everything about this book. It's great.
Absolutely great choice, great choice. Matt says Eugene Onegin, and I didn't know this was a book. I feel kind of silly for not knowing it
Hmm.
because I saw the opera. I used to own the DVD of the opera. I
Mm,
think who wrote the I cannot remember who the opera composer was now.
mm.
Uh Onegin opera. I cannot remember now. Oh, Tchaikovsky. It was Tchaikovsky. Okay, Tchaikovsky did the opera for that, and I watched it so many years ago and loved it, but I didn't know
Mhm.
it was a book, so now I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that would be right up your alley if it's got musical influence for
Mhm.
sure. Yes, Evie, The Bear and the Nightingale. I'm surprised you've made it almost 2 years, Evie, without going back to
It's
reread
really
that.
good. It's a really good trilogy.
I
I
have
liked it.
read I don't know why I stopped, but I read about 50% of the first book.
Oh,
And I just got like swept up in life and then forgot, I guess. And then I think I jumped into a buddy read or something. And then like I never really got back to it. But I really did like the beginning of what I read. So I do plan on going back to it. Simon says Le Guin is his favorite author,
I
which
love Le Guin. I fell down a
yeah.
rabbit hole last year of watching all these videos about Le Guin and just
Hmm.
found her to be such a fascinating mind.
Hmm.
And reading The Dispossessed has me convinced I need to read more Le Guin, but I've just been slacking.
We only have so much time.
No, it's so
We
sad.
only have so much
So
time.
sad.
Lathe of Heaven is so good. I loved
So sad.
Earthsea, my entire library, but looking forward to my, yes, next Realm of the Outerlings read for Derry.
Yes.
A Night in the Lonesome October for me. Excellent.
Heard that's good, really good.
Yeah. First Law. Yes, I am looking to reread First Law. It was between this and The Blade itself for this
Yes.
person for me because I really am itching to reread The Blade itself, especially since I have now read all the other books this year. I want to reread the original three and see if my changing of ranking order would happen or if it would stay exactly as
I
it
saw
is.
that you're gonna have Vera on Love Bomb,
Yes.
and I know she's
Yeah.
a massive, massive First Law fan. Like, she said
Yeah.
that Abercrombie's the reason she started her channel, so
Yeah.
you all will have a lot to talk
We
about.
will have a lot of Joe to discuss, yes.
A lot of Joe to discuss. There you go.
Yeah, pretty much. Honestly, I'm excited for it. I saw her on your Why Read, and then we kind of had this like little side chat. I was like, oh, a Polish booktuber. Excellent. Like that's really cool. Because for some reason, I mean, this is all YouTube, right? Like she'd never come up in my algorithm before. So I had never seen her until your thing. And like when I saw you posting your coming up on Why Read, people were like, "Oh, I'm so excited to see Vera." And I was like, "Who?" And
Yeah.
I then went and looked her up and I was like, "Oh, you and I both like First Law quite a bit."
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
good.
she's great. I found her because she did a video called "I read the most complex fantasy book ever," talking about Gardens of the Moon,
Um,
and, I watched it because I'm like, any female booktuber watching Malazan has my attention,
yes.
and I really loved the video. I loved her personality
Awesome.
right away, and
Mhm.
so, I think you 2 will have a lot to talk about. She also did an
Yeah.
Emily Henry video too, so.
I just watched it, yes. You and her tend to agree more than she and I did.
Oops.
Which is fine, even though it hurt my heart just a I'm just kidding. The fact that she liked any of Emily Henry's books makes me happy. That's the thing. Like, it's anytime you have an author that you love so much, my hope is that a person connects with one of their books. It's not common that every single book is going to hit for somebody. So if it's just one, then it's just one, and I'll take
Yeah.
that as the win.
I'm
But
definitely gonna read from Emily Henry again. Like,
yes,
there was enough that I liked about the book that I
yes.
was like, "I will read another book by her for sure."
I think I'm looking at them here.
I think The Book Lovers is the one I wanna get to the most. I think also based on
Yeah.
Vera's video as well, but,
I struggled with Book Lovers. It's my
um,
least favorite, which might make it your favorite
who
because
knows?
there is a very distinctive camp for Emily Henry that
Mhm.
either you really love Book Lovers and Beach Read, or you love Happy Place and People We Meet on Vacation, and then everyone loves Funny Story.
Oh, okay, I need
So
to check
yeah, it's
that one
just
out
like
then, yeah.
weird overlapping. But see, that's the thing. Simon loves Book Lovers. It's the best. Yeah, Evie also really loved Book Lovers, but Evie's of the she's not in that category because she also loves Happy Place the most, like I do. But for me, my struggle with Book Lovers is the sister plays a more significant role in that book than any other book side characters. And I found that the book centered more on the main character and the sister than it did on the main character and the love interest. But that worked for some people, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, and honestly, oddly, I heard, Brian from Bookish, who was on Why Read a few episodes ago, he
Mm-hmm.
recently read and talked about the book Beach Read, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
He was said he's not necessarily the audience for that kind of genre or that kind
Yeah.
of book, but he wanted to give it a chance. And when he started talking about it and how it kind of poked fun at both lit fic and romance in
Mm-hmm.
this meta way, I guess, because they're both writers.
Yeah.
I thought it sounded kind of fun. And I
Mm-hmm.
did start the audiobook for that years and years ago, and then I just DNF'd it for whatever reason. But I might give it
Yeah.
another chance sometime.
It's interesting because Beach Read was her first published romance one, and the first one of hers I read was Funny Story, and then I went, I think, Beach Read, Book Lovers, People We Meet on Vacation, and Happy Place, and I ended with Happy Place, and for me, it just love that book so much. But I then went back a month or so ago and I reread most of them. And I found that on my second read through, while I really love Beach Read, I don't think it's as strong as some of the later ones because I think she was finding her footing in
Okay.
writing that genre, but still excellent, like really, really excellent. And she deals in that book quite well with grief and loss. And I felt of all of the male love interests, Gus is arguably the most developed in that you really know why he ticks and why he does things. And I really, really love that for Beach Read. So yeah, highly, highly recommend any Emily Henry.
Cool.
Yeah. Giving a genre you don't usually click with a chance now and then can play off. Yeah, lit RPG. Yes. Yeah, that has been anything romance for me this year, apparently. Have you picked up a genre this year that you haven't really read much of previously?
Well, I think it would count.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been reading, let's see, trying to think of other genres I've been reading because I have been reading more lit fic, I guess, and more classics
Yeah.
than usual and science fiction. I guess I've been reading a lot of different genres, kind
Yeah.
of going through a little bit of an identity crisis. Maybe I don't know. And it's not that I am burnt out on fantasy by any means,
Sure.
but I just think for some reason it makes my fantasy journey all the more rich if I'm like reading other stuff in
Yeah,
between.
absolutely.
So that's been my journey lately. How about you?
I've read a few books this year that have really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I read Bone Clocks with You,
Oh yeah.
which was a big one for me. When I started contemporary romance, I was like, what is this? And ended up absolutely loving Emily Henry more than most other people that I've read. And then what was the one that was just on the tip of my tongue? Oh, I've read The Remains of the Day,
Oh,
which
I'm
is
so
not
excited to
something,
get to that. Yeah.
yeah, which I would have typically read. So I have tried to push myself in a few different areas this year, and it's paid off because for the most part I've really enjoyed when I have ventured into those new areas and stuff. And like I said, I've found a new favorite author in Emily Henry. I have found that I really love romantasy, which is great because there's endless books in romantasy for me to read. And yeah, I mean, the Bone Clocks is something I think about like on a regular basis.
Me too. I still
Yeah.
think about that book. I was just telling Jimmy that recently, like, how
Mhm.
that book still hits me, like, it still
Mhm.
stays with me. It
Yeah.
stayed with me a lot more than other books I thought would stay with me more since the beginning of the
Mhm.
year. So, and I think that what's special about David Mitchell is often put in a camp with writers like Neil Gaiman
Yeah.
and others who are, I guess, like, pushing the boundaries of the genre,
He's
and
really
that's
not like Neil Gaiman, though, in my opinion. Yeah.
I mean, no, not really, yeah,
I
but
think he's his own breed. He's excellent.
but he's definitely one of those authors, I think, that pushes the boundaries of the genre, kinda like
Yeah.
Ishiguro. Ishiguro does that with
Yep.
some of his books, and
Yeah.
so I personally think that appeals to me a lot.
Sure.
Ken Liu does that as well in The
Yeah.
Paper Menagerie, where you can't in some ways, he does have some sci-fi light
Mhm.
aspects to his stories, but
Yeah.
then you have a little bit of magical realism, and
Sure.
so it's like more speculative fiction, I guess, is what
Mhm.
people call it. So I love that. I love
Mhm.
books that I love conventional genre fiction too, don't get me wrong. Like, I love,
Yeah.
for example, A Song of Ice and Fire can do no wrong. I love First Law. I
Yes.
love Malazan, but I also love books that just push the boundaries a little bit and
Yeah,
aren't
for sure.
quite something you can put in a box, and The Bone Clocks definitely fits that.
Without question. It's something that, Philip and I were talking about last night in the sense that I feel a lot of the time we now go into books with a very clear expectation based on the genre of what we're anticipating as we read the book. And Bone Clocks, as you know, because I was lamenting this while we were reading it, I was like, what is this book? I don't know how to understand like what I'm supposed to expect until I finally force myself to kind of turn my brain off and just go with the flow of the story. And I think about the end of that book like every other day, honestly, which is
Yeah.
funny because when we read it, I didn't like the ending of the book initially, but you and Jimmy really loved the ending, and you guys really swung me over to your
Mm.
side with your arguments basically as to why it was really fitting for the end of the book. And that and and Crispin Hershey have been what have stuck with me the
Yes.
most from that
Yeah,
book.
it's interesting because there are, like, speculative elements, obviously, that thread
Mhm.
everything together,
Yeah.
and that particular part of the story, not necessarily the very end that you're just talking about,
Yeah.
but the way that the fantasy elements
Mhm.
come together, I wasn't the biggest fan of that, like,
Yeah.
that felt, like, very rushed for me, and it didn't
Yeah.
feel like it was quite as fleshed out as I would have hoped, but and I think we had a great discussion about that with Jimmy. We had such a great discussion. That was a great discussion, by the way.
It was a really good
Um
discussion. I really enjoyed that. I mean, obviously, I enjoy you and Jimmy. You're both excellent conversationalists and very well-read people, so it's always fun to have those talks, but it's just a book that offers so much as well. Like, it's so funny though because it's not a very long book when you look at it in terms of the fantasy book, but there really is so much to pick at. I feel like our conversation could have been a few hours longer if we had really wanted it to
Yes.
be, you
Well, that's
know?
the thing is, like, the character work was
Yeah.
so good. It was so
Mhm.
detailed, it was so rich, and then the connection between characters and the
Yes.
exploration of time was
Mhm.
so well done that honestly, in some ways, as much as I loved Hyperion, I feel like in some ways my experience of Hyperion was shadowed a little bit because I read the Bone
Interesting.
Clocks earlier in the year, and
Yeah.
there are different ways of telling this narrative because, in this story, like I said, these characters come together and then they start telling their
Yeah.
backstories, whereas in the Bone Clocks, you're going through time periods and
Yeah.
you're reading these 5 different I think it's 5 different stories in different
Yes.
time periods. But it feels kind of similar in that way because you're getting these separate stories that
Yeah.
are fleshed out very distinctly due to time and place and character. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was so much more emotionally rich
Yeah.
reading the Bone Clocks. And then when I got to Hyperion, there were some stories, like I said, there were a couple that were extremely
Mm.
powerful. But because I had read the Bone Clocks, every story for me in that particular
Yeah.
book hit home so hard
Mhm.
it slightly made Hyperion slightly shadow in
Sure.
comparison.
I get that
Yeah.
completely. I think what is so good about the bone clocks that we might not necessarily get in other SFF stories is that it's so human. It's
Yes.
so human.
Yes.
And each person is so flawed, but simultaneously has aspects about them that you can understand, even if they're sinister or evil. You go, I get how you got there, because we share that human experience. And David Mitchell, this is something that we talked about, just does research unlike anyone else that I've really encountered. Because it's set on Earth. The locations that he talks about are real. They're affirmed. One of them is in Montreal. It's where I grew up. And I was saying to you and Jimmy, I was like, this is not a part of the city that people normally talk about. Like that clues me in as to how much research he's actually done for these people. And the we talked about this too, just the evolution of vernacular and language in
Mhm.
that book as to how things change from the 80s to currently where we are now, and then what it could be going forward.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All of it was just so, so, so good. So yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
I don't know. Yeah, I absolutely that was actually one of the best characters novels I've ever read in
Yeah.
some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. All right. Well, any final thoughts, Joanna, on our finally fall book tag?
I think we covered the categories very well,
I think
and
we
I
did
just wanna
okay.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for hosting this, and thank you to
Anytime.
everyone in the chat for chiming in. I loved hearing everybody's answers to these
Yes.
particular to these prompts. So, yeah, until next time, this was fun.
Yes. We'll have to make it our continued annual tradition.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that no matter where you are in the world, that you are having a wonderful day. Yay if it is fall for you. If it's going to be spring for you soon as well, huzzah, a new season. Let's just celebrate that. But thanks as always for checking in, guys, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.